Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, we step quietly into the shadowed halls of history, where the gentle whisper of leather and the soft tap of wooden lasts echo through time. We find ourselves at the threshold of a medieval guild hall, where the ancient art of shoemaking was honed and perfected. As we cross this worn stone doorstep, we enter a world of meticulous craft and time-honored tradition. The heavy oak door creaks open, revealing a dimly lit interior bathed in the warm glow of flickering candles. The air is thick with the scent of tanned leather and beeswax, a fragrant reminder of the countless hours spent in pursuit of the perfect pair of shoes. Here, in this hallowed space, we will unravel the intricate tapestry of guild regulations that govern this shoemaker's craft. As our eyes adjust to the muted light, we see the long wooden tables where apprentices and masters alike bent over their work. The soft scrape of tools against leather fills the air, a soothing rhythm that speaks of dedication and patience. Each stitch, each cut, each careful measurement is a testament to the exacting standards set forth by the guild. We move deeper into the hall, our footsteps muffled by the sawdust-strewn floor. Along the walls, shelves laden with wooden lasts of various sizes stand as silent sentinels, each one a carefully crafted mold waiting to shape the next masterpiece. These are not mere tools, but the very foundation of the shoemaker's art, passed down through generations and guarded with jealous care. In the corner, a weathered ledger lies open, its pages filled with the precise handwriting of guild scribes. Here, we find the heart of the shoemaking guild's regulations, a complex web of rules and traditions that governed every aspect of the craft. Let us pause for a moment to examine these ancient decrees, each one a thread in the rich tapestry of medieval guild life. The first regulation that catches our eye speaks of the quality of materials. No shoemaker within the guild was permitted to use inferior leather or substandard thread. Each hide was to be carefully inspected, its quality vouched for by the master tanner before it could grace the cobbler's bench. This insistence on excellence ensured that every pair of shoes leaving the guild hall would stand the test of time and wear. As we turn the page, we encounter rules governing the training of apprentices. Young boys, some no more than 10 years old, would enter the guild hall with dreams of mastery dancing in their eyes. But the path to becoming a shoemaker was long and arduous. 7 years they would spend, learning every nuance of the craft under the watchful eye of a master. From cutting leather to stitching saws, from fitting lasts to applying the final polish, every step was to be mastered before they could call themselves true shoemakers. The soft rustle of parchment fills the air as we delve deeper into the guild's regulations. Here, we find strict guidelines on working hours and conditions. Shoemakers were forbidden from working by candlelight, lest the quality of their work suffer in the dim illumination. Instead, they were to rise with the sun and end their labors as dusk fell, ensuring that each pair of shoes was crafted in the clear light of day. But the guild's reach extended far beyond the walls of the workshop. We discover rules governing the personal lives of its members, dictating everything from their dress to their behavior in public. A shoemaker was to be a model of respectability, his conduct beyond reproach. To bring dishonor upon oneself was to bring shame upon the entire guild, a transgression that could result in severe penalties or even expulsion from the Brotherhood of Cobblers. As we continue our exploration, we come across regulations that speak to the fierce pride and protectionism of the guild. No shoemaker was permitted to poach customers from his fellow craftsmen, nor was he allowed to undercut prices set by the guild. These measures ensured fair competition and maintained the high standards for which the guild was known. The pages of the ledger reveal the guild's commitment to innovation tempered by tradition. While new techniques and styles were encouraged, they had to be approved by a council of master shoemakers before being adopted. This careful balance between progress and preservation allowed the craft to evolve while maintaining its core principles. We pause to admire a beautifully crafted pair of shoes displayed on a nearby pedestal. These are the masterpieces, the crowning achievement of a shoemaker's career. To create such a work of art, a craftsman had to submit his finest pair to the guild for inspection. Only if they met the exacting standards set forth in the regulations would he be granted the title of Master Shoemaker. As the candles burn low, casting long shadows across the guild hall, we come to the final pages of the ledger. Here, we find the regulations governing the guild's charitable works. For the medieval Shoemakers Guild was not merely a trade association, but a brotherhood bound by ties of mutual support and compassion. Members were required to contribute to a common fund, which provided for sick or injured craftsmen and supported the widows and orphans of deceased members. The last flickering flame illuminates a final regulation, one that speaks to the very heart of the shoemaker's craft. It decrees that every pair of shoes, from the humblest work boot to the most ornate courtly slipper, must be made with the same care and attention to detail. For in the eyes of the guild, every customer deserved the best, regardless of their station in life. As we close the ancient ledger, its pages heavy with the weight of centuries, we take a moment to reflect on the legacy of these guild regulations. They were more than mere rules. They were the foundation upon which generations of shoemakers built their craft. In their careful balance of quality, fairness, and tradition, we see the seeds of the modern concepts of professional standards and ethical business practices. The guild hall grows quiet now, the ghosts of countless shoemakers fading back into the shadows of history. But as we prepare to leave this hallowed space, we carry with us a deeper appreciation for the skill, dedication, and pride that went into every pair of medieval shoes. The legacy of the guild lives on in the careful stitches and polished leather of modern footwear, a testament to the enduring power of craft and tradition. As we step back across the worn stone threshold, the heavy oak door closing softly behind us, we leave behind the world of medieval guilds and regulations. But the echoes of those ancient craftsmen linger, reminding us that true quality and dedication to one's craft are timeless virtues, as relevant today as they were in the dim-lit halls of a medieval shoemaker's guild. In the quiet corners of medieval Europe, where cobblestone streets wound through bustling marketplaces, a silent revolution was taking place. Shoemakers, those humble artisans of leather and sole, were forming guilds not with fanfare or flourish, but with a whispered commitment to craft and community. These were not associations born of ambition or avarice, but rather coalitions of care, ensuring that each pair of shoes bore the mark of quality and tradition. As we step into the shadowed workshops of these medieval cobblers, we find ourselves immersed in a world where time moved at the pace of a carefully stitched seam. The air is thick with the scent of tanned leather and beeswax, the rhythmic tap of hammers on wooden lasts echoing through narrow streets. Here, in these modest guild halls and cramped workrooms, the foundations of modern industry were being laid, one meticulously crafted shoe at a time. The roots of regulation in these guilds ran deep, intertwining with the very fabric of medieval society. They were not the product of sudden decree or royal whim, but rather the slow accumulation of wisdom, passed down through generations of masters to their apprentices. Each rule, each standard, was a thread in the tapestry of craft, woven with care and purpose. At the heart of these regulations lay a profound understanding of balance between competition and cooperation, between innovation and tradition, between the needs of the individual craftsman and those of the community. The guild masters, with their weathered hands and keen eyes, knew that unchecked ambition could lead to chaos, just as surely as stagnation could lead to decline. And so, with the patience of those who work with stubborn materials, they began to shape the rules that would govern their trade. Quality assurance became their watchword, a mantra repeated in every workshop from dawn to dusk. Leather hides were scrutinized with the intensity of a scholar poring over ancient texts, each imperfection noted, each strength celebrated. Soles were measured not once, but thrice, to ensure that every step taken in their shoes would be one of comfort and durability. But quality alone was not enough to ensure the survival of their craft. The guild masters understood that the temptation to undercut one's fellows, to gain a momentary advantage in the marketplace, could lead to a race to the bottom, a contest in which all would ultimately lose. And so, with the wisdom of Solomon, they instituted a system of price fixing that was less about profit and more about preservation. Fixed prices were set for common styles, a silent agreement among artisans that spoke louder than any town crier's call. There would be no haggling, no frantic bargaining in the marketplace. Instead, customers would know that whether they purchased their shoes from Master Thomas or Master William, the price and the quality would be the same. It was a system that bred trust, not just between craftsman and customer, but between the shoemakers themselves. Yet even as they sought to maintain this delicate equilibrium, the guild masters were aware of the dangers of unchecked growth. They had seen other trades falter under the weight of too many apprentices, too many shops, too much ambition. And so, with the foresight of those who planned not for the season, but for the century, they implemented quantity limits. These limits were not arbitrary restrictions, but carefully considered safeguards against the erosion of their craft. Guild ordinances dictated how many apprentices one master could take under his wing, ensuring that each young learner received the full measure of attention and instruction. They specified how many benches could crowd a single workshop, preserving not just the physical space needed for quality work, but the mental space required for creativity and care. Each of these rules, from the weighing of leather to the counting of menches, was drawn with the same careful attention to detail that went into the crafting of a fine pair of shoes. They were not shackles to bind the ambitions of the shoemakers, but rather guideposts to lead them along the path of sustainable prosperity. As we wander through the narrow streets of these medieval towns, peering into the workshops where apprentices bent over their tasks and masters oversaw their work with watchful eyes, we begin to understand the profound impact of these quiet regulations. They were not just rules for making shoes, but principles for building a community that valued quality over quantity, cooperation over competition, and the long-term health of the craft over short-term gain. The legacy of these medieval guilds extends far beyond the realm of footwear. In their careful balancing act between individual creativity and collective responsibility, we can see the seeds of modern labor laws, quality control standards, and even ethical business practices. The guild masters, with their leather aprons and ink-stained ledgers, were unwittingly laying the groundwork for a future they could scarcely imagine. As we leave behind the cobbled streets and timber-bird houses of medieval Europe, the echoes of hammers on lasts fading into the mists of history, we carry with us a deeper appreciation for the power of quiet regulation. In a world that often celebrates disruption and unbridled growth, the lessons of these ancient shoemakers' guilds remind us of the value of patience, of careful stewardship, and of the enduring strength found in community. The shoes crafted under these guild regulations may have long since turned to dust, but the principles that guided their creation continue to shape our world. In boardrooms and workshops, in factories and artisan studios, the spirit of those medieval guilds lives on, a testament to the enduring power of craft, community, and careful regulation. As we step forward into an uncertain future, perhaps we would do well to pause and consider the wisdom of those long-ago shoemakers. In their quiet dedication to quality, their commitment to fair practices, and their understanding of the delicate balance between individual and collective needs, we may find guidance for our own path forward. For in the end, the true measure of any society lies not in the height of its towers or the speed of its progress, but in the care with which it crafts its foundations and the wisdom with which it regulates its growth. And so, as we close this chapter on the roots of regulation in medieval shoemakers' guilds, we are left not with a sense of conclusion, but of continuation. The story of human industry and ingenuity is an ongoing one, with each generation building upon the work of those who came before. In the quiet dedication of those medieval artisans, we find not just a glimpse of our past, but a blueprint for our future, a future where quality, fairness, and community are not just ideals, but the very foundation upon which we build our world. In the dimly lit workshop, a young apprentice of 12 summers stood nervously before the master shoemaker. The air was thick with the scent of tanned leather and beeswax, a fragrance that would become as familiar as breath itself over the coming years. The master, his weathered hands steady as oak, presented a simple awl to the boy, the first tool he would wield in his journey to mastery. The Guild of Cordwainers had strict regulations governing the apprenticeship of novice shoemakers. Each step of the process was meticulously documented, a tradition as old as the craft itself. The master unrolled a parchment, its edges curled from years of use, and began to recite the ancient oath that would bind apprentice to master for the next 7 years. As the words echoed through the workshop, the boy's eyes widened, taking in the rows of lasts hanging from the rafters, each a testament to the countless feet that had been measured and fitted within these walls. The master's voice, gravelly yet kind, spoke of dedication, of honor, and of the sacred duty to uphold the guild standards. The first year would be one of observation and menial tasks. The apprentice would sweep the floors, tend the fire, and learn to identify the various types of leather by sight and touch. Every evening, as the light faded and the day's work came to a close, the master would quiz the boy on what he had learned, noting his progress in a leather-bound ledger. As the seasons turned, the apprentice's responsibilities grew. By the second year, he was entrusted with cutting leather, his hands guided by the master's patient instruction. Each piece had to be perfect, for waste was not tolerated in a craft where materials were precious and often scarce. The guild inspectors would visit regularly, their keen eyes scrutinizing every stitch and seam. The third year brought the challenge of stitching. Hours were spent practicing on scraps, perfecting the tension and spacing of each stitch. The master would often recount tales of shoes he had crafted for nobles and merchants, each story a lesson in the importance of precision and care. By the fourth year, the apprentice had grown in skill and stature. He was now allowed to work on actual orders, though always under the watchful eye of the master. The guild's regulations were clear: no apprentice-made shoe could be sold without thorough inspection and approval from both master and guild representative. The fifth year saw the introduction of more complex techniques. The apprentice learned to create ornate buckles and to emboss intricate designs into the leather. Each new skill was a step closer to the coveted title of journeyman, a rank that would allow him to work independently and even travel to other towns to ply his trade. As the sixth year dawned, the apprentice found himself taking on more responsibility within the workshop. He began to assist in the training of newer apprentices, passing on the knowledge that had been so carefully imparted to him. The master watched with pride as his pupil grew not just in skill, but in character and leadership. The final year of apprenticeship was one of refinement and preparation. The young man, no longer a boy, worked tirelessly to perfect his craft. He created a masterpiece, a pair of shoes fit for a king that would be presented to the guild for evaluation. This piece would determine whether he would be granted the status of journeyman or if more time as an apprentice was required. Throughout these years, the guild's presence was constant. Quarterly inspections ensured that standards were maintained, that apprentices were treated fairly, and that the reputation of the craft was upheld. The master's logbook, its pages now filled with years of notations, stood as a testament to the progress and dedication of both teacher and student. On the eve of his final assessment, the apprentice stood in the workshop, surrounded by the tools and materials that had become extensions of his own hands. The master approached, carrying a small, intricately carved box. Inside lay a set of tools, a gift to mark the end of the apprenticeship and the beginning of a new chapter. As dawn broke on the day of reckoning, the apprentice made his way to the guild hall, his masterpiece carefully wrapped and cradled in his arms. The streets were quiet, save for the distant sound of other workshops coming to life. He paused at the grand oak doors, taking a deep breath before stepping into the hall where his future would be decided. The guild elders, their robes adorned with the symbols of their craft, sat in solemn judgment. The apprentice presented his work, explaining each choice of material, each technique employed. His voice, once timid, now rang clear with confidence, born of knowledge and experience. Hours passed as the elders examined every stitch, every curve of the leather. The apprentice stood tall, his posture a reflection of the pride instilled by years of diligent work. Finally, the head of the guild rose, a smile breaking through his stern demeanor. With words that had been spoken for generations, the apprentice was declared a journeyman. The hall erupted in cheers as fellow craftsmen welcomed him into their ranks. As he accepted the guild seal, the newly minted journeyman's thoughts turned to his own workshop, to the apprentices he would one day guide, and to the shoes yet to be made. The ritual of apprenticeship, with its trials and triumphs, had shaped not just a craftsman, but a guardian of tradition. As he stepped out into the sunlight, the journeyman knew that the legacy of the guild would live on through his hands, just as it had through countless generations before him. Guild regulations governed every aspect of shoemaking, from the selection of materials to the final stitches. In the dimly lit workshops of medieval Europe, craftsmen labored under strict codes that ensured quality and consistency. These rules, passed down through generations, were not mere bureaucratic constraints, but a testament to the artistry and dedication of the trade. Materials were scrutinized with utmost care. Leather, the lifeblood of shoemaking, was treated with reverence. Tanners worked tirelessly in cool, damp cellars, their hands calloused from years of handling hides. Each piece was examined meticulously, held up to flickering candlelight to check for imperfections. The thickness of the leather was judged not by modern instruments, but by the experienced touch of master craftsmen. Uniformity was prized above all else. Shoemakers employed ingenious methods to ensure consistency. Small, polished stones served as weights, carefully balanced on delicate scales. These primitive yet effective tools allowed artisans to gauge the thickness of leather with remarkable precision. A hide too thin would result in shoes that wore quickly, while excess thickness was seen as wasteful, an affront to the frugal sensibilities of the guild. Measurement was an art form in itself. Guild regulations dictated exact proportions for each component of a shoe. Soles were cut generously, always 2 inches wider than the final product would require. This excess allowed for the meticulous shaping process that would follow. Edges were not left sharp and angular, but lovingly beveled into gentle curves. These curves were not merely aesthetic choices. They ensured comfort and durability, a hallmark of quality craftsmanship. The numerical precision demanded by guild regulations might seem oppressive to modern sensibilities. Yet to the medieval shoemaker, these rules were not shackles, but guideposts. They were affirmations of care, reminders of the sacred trust between craftsman and customer. Each measurement, each careful cut was a promise of quality fulfilled. In the bustling markets of medieval towns, shoes were more than mere commodities. They were expressions of skill, status, and identity. The wealthy merchant's boots, adorned with intricate tooling and dyed in rich hues, spoke volumes about his station in life. Even the humble peasant's simple leather shoes bore the mark of guild-regulated craftsmanship. Guild masters took their role as guardians of quality seriously. Apprentices spent years learning not just the physical skills of shoemaking, but the philosophy behind each regulation. They were taught to see beyond the immediate task, to understand how each stitch and cut contributed to the final product. This holistic approach to craftsmanship ensured that even the most mundane pair of shoes was imbued with a sense of purpose and pride. The tools of the trade were themselves subject to strict regulation. Awls, needles, and knives were inspected regularly, their edges honed to perfection. A dull tool was seen not just as inefficient, but as an insult to the craft itself. Shoemakers took great pride in maintaining their instruments, often passing down prized tools through generations of artisans. Color played a crucial role in guild regulations. Certain dyes were reserved for specific ranks within society, their use strictly controlled. The vibrant reds and deep blues of nobility were off limits to common folk, enforced not just by law, but by the guilds themselves. Shoemakers who dared to flout these color codes risked severe penalties, including expulsion from the Guild of Fate, tantamount to economic ruin. The stitching of a shoe was perhaps the most regulated aspect of the craft. Guild rules dictated the number of stitches per inch, the type of thread to be used, and even the angle at which the needle should pierce the leather. These exacting standards ensured that shoes would withstand the rigors of daily wear, from cobblestone streets to muddy fields. Apprentices spent countless hours practicing their stitching, their fingers raw and bleeding as they strove to meet the guild's exacting standards. Only when they could produce a row of perfectly uniform stitches, invisible to the naked eye, were they allowed to progress in their training. The finishing touches on a shoe were subject to equally stringent regulations. Polishing was not a mere afterthought, but an integral part of the shoemaking process. Guilds prescribed specific waxes and oils to be used, their application a carefully guarded secret passed down through generations. The final sheen on a pair of shoes was a matter of pride for the craftsman and a sign of quality for the customer. Even the display of finished shoes in shop windows was regulated. Guild rules dictated how shoes should be arranged, which styles could be prominently featured, and even the cleanliness of the glass. These seemingly trivial details were seen as crucial to maintaining the reputation of the craft as a whole. Innovation within the bounds of guild regulations was a delicate balance. Craftsmen who developed new techniques or designs had to navigate a complex approval process. Guild masters would scrutinize proposed changes, weighing tradition against progress. This conservative approach ensured stability, but sometimes stifled creativity, leading to tensions within the guild structure. As centuries passed, guild regulations evolved to meet changing tastes and technologies. The introduction of new materials, such as rubber soles in the 19th century, posed challenges to traditional guild structures. Yet the core principles of quality and craftsmanship remained, a testament to the enduring legacy of medieval guild regulations. In the end, these ancient rules were more than mere bureaucratic red tape. They were a codification of centuries of wisdom, a bridge between past and present. The medieval shoemaker, laboring under flickering candlelight, was connected through these regulations to a vast network of fellow craftsmen across time and space. Each carefully measured sole, each perfectly beveled edge, was a small act of devotion to a greater ideal of craftsmanship and care. In the hallowed halls of the Shoemaker's Guild, a time-honored tradition unfolded. The culmination of years of toil and learning, a journeyman's final test loomed large. This was the creation of the masterpiece, a pair of shoes that would determine the craftsman's fate. The guild's regulations were exacting, each stitch and seam scrutinized with unwavering attention. As the apprentice labored, the weight of generations past seemed to press upon his shoulders. The leather, carefully selected and treated, lay before him like a canvas awaiting the artist's touch. With practiced hands, the journeyman began his work. The cutting of the leather was precise, each piece measured to the breadth of a hair. They all pierced the hide with deliberate care, creating holes for the waxed thread that would bind sole to upper. As the shoes took shape, the craftsman's mind wandered to the masters who had come before. Their wisdom, passed down through countless hours of instruction, guided his every move. The gentle tap of the hammer, the whisper of leather against wood, these were the sounds of creation, of legacy in the making. Days turned to weeks as the masterpiece neared completion. The journeyman worked tirelessly, aware that his future hung in the balance. Each evening, he would hold his work up to the fading light, searching for imperfections that only the most discerning eye could detect. At last, the moment of truth arrived. The guild elders gathered, their faces impassive as they examined the fruits of the journeyman's labor. The room fell silent, save for the soft crackle of the candle flame that illuminated the shoes. With reverent hands, the master of the guild lifted the masterpiece. His eyes, sharpened by decades of experience, traced every contour and seam. The stitching was scrutinized, the leather's quality assessed, and the overall form evaluated against the guild's exacting standards. Time seemed to stand still as the examination continued. The journeyman's heart raced, years of dedication condensed into this singular moment. Would his work be found worthy? Would he be welcomed into the ranks of master craftsmen? As the candle flickered, casting dancing shadows across the room, the master's expression softened. A nod, almost imperceptible, passed between the elders. The tension in the air dissipated, replaced by a sense of quiet triumph. The master turned to the journeyman, his voice carrying the weight of tradition. "You have proven your skill and dedication," he intoned. "Welcome, brother, to the Guild of Shoemakers." With these words, a transformation occurred. The journeyman, once an apprentice learning his trade, now stood as a full member of the guild. The masterpiece, a testament to his skill and perseverance, would serve as a benchmark for future generations. But the true mark of this achievement was yet to come. The master reached for a small tool, its surface worn smooth by countless hands before. With practiced precision, he pressed it against the sole of the masterpiece shoes. As he lifted the tool away, a symbol remained: the guild mark. This simple emblem, no larger than a thumbnail, spoke volumes. It was a declaration of quality, a promise to all who would wear these shoes that they were crafted by skilled hands and discerning eyes. The newly minted master gazed upon the mark with a mixture of pride and humility. He understood that this symbol was not merely a stamp of approval, but a responsibility. Each pair of shoes that left his workshop would now bear this mark, a silent pledge to uphold the standards of his craft. In the days and years that followed, the master honed his skills further. Each pair of shoes he created was a reflection of his dedication to excellence. The guild mark became a part of his identity, a quiet reminder of the journey that had brought him to this point. Customers sought out his work, recognizing the guild mark as a guarantee of quality. They knew that shoes bearing this symbol were not mere articles of clothing, but works of art crafted with care and precision. As the master's reputation grew, so too did his sense of belonging to something greater than himself. The guild was more than an association of craftsmen. It was a brotherhood bound by shared values and a commitment to excellence. In quiet moments, the master would often reflect on the significance of the guild mark. It was not just a symbol of personal achievement, but a link to a legacy stretching back through time. Each stamp connected him to the masters who had come before, and to those who would follow in his footsteps. The guild's regulations, once seen as daunting challenges, now felt like guideposts on the path to perfection. The master embraced them, understanding that they were the foundation upon which greatness was built. As he worked, the master found a rhythm in his craft. The cutting of leather, the stitching of seams, the shaping of soles, all became a dance of creation. Each pair of shoes was a testament to the enduring power of tradition and the timeless appeal of quality. Years passed, and the master found himself mentoring new apprentices. He shared not only the techniques of shoemaking, but also the values that the guild mark represented. With patience and wisdom, he guided them towards their own masterpieces, knowing that one day they too would bear the responsibility of the guild mark. In the workshop, surrounded by the tools of his trade and the scent of leather, the master felt a sense of contentment. The guild mark on his work was more than a stamp. It was a symbol of a life dedicated to craft, to quality, and to the pursuit of excellence. As twilight fell and the candles were lit, the master would often pause to admire a finished pair of shoes. In the soft glow, the guild mark seemed to shine, a quiet reminder of the journey from apprentice to master, from novice to craftsman. This small emblem, so easily overlooked, held within it the story of countless hours of practice, of failures overcome and skills hard won. It spoke of a community of artisans, each striving to uphold the standards set by those who came before. In the end, the master knew that his legacy would not be measured in the number of shoes he crafted, but in the quality of his work and the values he passed on. The guild mark was his signature, his promise to the world that every stitch, every seam, every curve was crafted with care and pride. And so, as the candle burned low and the day's work came to an end, the master placed his tools aside with reverence. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to create and to excel. But for now, he could rest, secure in the knowledge that he had earned his place among the masters of his craft. The guild mark, that simple stamped emblem, would continue to tell its story, a story of belonging, of quality, and of measured skill. It was a gentle pride, anchored in discipline. It would endure long after the master's own journey had come to an end. In the quiet corners of medieval towns, as the last rays of sunlight faded, shoemakers gathered in hushed reverence. Guild halls, their wooden beams worn smooth by generations of craftsmen, hosted these solemn assemblies. The air was thick with the scent of leather and beeswax, a testament to the trade that bound these men together. As darkness settled outside, a senior master would rise, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. A brief invocation to Saint Crispin, patron saint of cobblers, or a moment of contemplative silence would mark the commencement of their meeting. The assembled craftsmen, from grizzled masters to eager journeymen, leaned in, their voices barely above a whisper as they addressed the matters at hand. The guild's regulations on shoemaking were not merely rules, but the very lifeblood of their craft. Passed down through generations, these edicts were preserved with the utmost care. In a chest of polished oak, lined with the finest linen, lay parchment scrolls bearing the wisdom of ages. Each regulation was inscribed with meticulous attention, the ink a deep, rich black against the creamy surface. At the heart of these regulations lay the unwavering commitment to quality. Every pair of shoes that left a guild member's workshop was expected to meet exacting standards. The type of leather, the stitching technique, even the composition of the wax used to treat the thread, all were specified in painstaking detail. Masters would often run their fingers along the edge of a sole, their touch more discerning than any written guideline. Apprenticeships, the lifeblood of the guild's future, were governed by strict protocols. Young boys, some barely into their teens, would be bound to a master for a term of years. The regulations dictated not only the skills to be imparted, but also the moral instruction expected of the master. Honesty, diligence, and respect for the craft were to be instilled alongside the technical knowledge of last-making and leather cutting. The guild's reach extended beyond the confines of individual workshops. Market days saw masters appointed as inspectors, their trained eyes scrutinizing the wares of both guild members and outsiders. Any shoe found wanting, be it in materials or craftsmanship, would be confiscated without hesitation. The reputation of the guild was paramount, and substandard work was a threat to all. Innovation, while not discouraged, was approached with cautious deliberation. News of a novel stitching technique or a foreign leather treatment would spark hushed debates. Around the guild hall's tables, masters would stroke their beards thoughtfully, weighing tradition against progress. Any change to established methods required the consensus of the guild's leadership, a process that could span months or even years. The regulation of prices was another delicate matter addressed in the guild scrolls. Fair compensation for quality work was balanced against the need to keep shoes accessible to the townsfolk. Seasonal adjustments were made, accounting for the availability of raw materials and the ebb and flow of demand. These discussions often stretched late into the night, with journeymen offering insights from their daily interactions with customers. Disputes between guild members, though rare, were handled with the utmost discretion. The guild warden, a figure chosen for his wisdom and impartiality, would hear both sides in the privacy of his workshop. Solutions were sought that preserved the harmony of the guild while upholding its standards. The outcome of such mediations was recorded in the guild's ledgers, creating precedents for future generations. The guild's commitment to its community extended beyond the realm of footwear. Regulations mandated contributions to local charities and participation in civic events. On feast days, shoemakers would march in processions, their guild banner held high, a symbol of pride and belonging. The poor of the town often found their way to guild members' doors, knowing that a pair of sturdy shoes might be offered as alms. Environmental concerns, though not named as such, were woven into the fabric of guild regulations. The tanning of leather, a process essential to their craft, was carefully controlled to minimize its impact on local waterways. Waste materials were repurposed where possible, with scraps of leather finding new life as patches or components of children's toys. As the years passed, the guild's regulations evolved, adapting to changing times while preserving the essence of their craft. New entries were added to the scrolls with great ceremony, each word weighed carefully before being committed to parchment. The collective wisdom of generations of shoemakers was distilled into these living documents. The guild's approach to enforcement was firm, but not without compassion. First offenses were often met with warnings and guidance, the erring member taken aside for private counsel. Repeated infractions, however, could lead to fines or, in extreme cases, expulsion from the guild, a fate that meant not only professional disgrace, but often economic ruin. Training in the intricacies of guild regulations was an ongoing process. Apprentices were quizzed regularly on the finer points of their craft's governance. Journeymen, aspiring to mastership, were expected to demonstrate not only technical proficiency, but a deep understanding of the guild's ethos and rules. The guild's library, a small but cherished collection, housed not only their own regulations, but also treatises on shoemaking from across Europe. Access to these volumes was a privilege earned through years of service and dedication. On quiet afternoons, one might find a master poring over a text from Florence or Paris, seeking insights to enrich their local practices. As night deepened and the discussions drew to a close, the guild members would rise, their faces etched with the gravity of their responsibilities. A final prayer or moment of reflection would mark the end of the meeting. They would file out into the narrow streets, returning to workshops where apprentices waited, eager for news and guidance. In their homes and workshops, the shoemakers of the guild lived and breathed their regulations. These were not mere rules imposed from above, but a shared commitment to excellence, a covenant between craftsmen and community. With every stitch and every sole, they honored the legacy of those who came before and paved the way for those yet to come. In the shadowy world of medieval shoemaking guilds, not all tools were created equal. Some, like the curved leather knife or the intricate heel press, were shrouded in secrecy and controversy. These implements, though seemingly innocuous to the untrained eye, held the power to revolutionize the craft and threaten the very foundations of the guild system. The master shoemakers, guardians of ancient techniques, viewed these innovations with a mixture of fascination and fear. They understood that each new tool had the potential to upset the delicate balance of their trade, challenging the time-honored methods passed down through generations. Consider the case of the spring-loaded awl, a device capable of punching precise holes in leather with unprecedented speed. In certain towns, its mere possession could lead to stern reprimands or even expulsion from the guild. The elders argued that such efficiency would rob the craft of its soul, reducing the art of shoemaking to a mere mechanical process. But it wasn't just tools that fell under the guild's scrutiny. Even the stitches themselves were subject to strict regulation. Certain patterns, known as the master's mark, were reserved exclusively for those who had proven their worth through years of dedicated apprenticeship. To attempt these forbidden designs before one's time was to invite swift and severe consequences. In the quiet workshops of medieval Europe, apprentices learned to navigate this complex web of rules and traditions. They watched their masters with keen eyes, absorbing not just the techniques of the trade, but the unspoken codes that governed their world. The rhythm of the workshop, the tap of the hammer, the whisper of leather, became a language all its own, understood only by those initiated into the guild's inner circle. As the years passed, some guilds began to relax their stance on certain tools. The steel toe rounder, once viewed with suspicion, gradually found its way into more workshops. Yet even as it gained acceptance, the old guard maintained a wary eye on its use, ensuring that it did not completely supplant the traditional methods they held dear. The tension between innovation and tradition was a constant undercurrent in the life of a medieval shoemaker. Each new tool or technique brought with it the promise of greater efficiency, but also the threat of disrupting the carefully cultivated hierarchy within the guild. Master craftsmen debated long into the night, weighing the benefits of progress against the preservation of their art. In some regions, the introduction of new tools required a formal vote by the guild members. These gatherings were solemn affairs, where passionate arguments echoed through candlelit halls. Advocates for change spoke of increased production and improved quality, while traditionalists warned of lost skills and the dilution of their craft's essence. The heel clamp, a device that revolutionized the attachment of heels to shoes, became a particular point of contention. Its ability to dramatically reduce the time required for this crucial step in shoemaking was undeniable. Yet many masters feared that its widespread adoption would render obsolete the hard-won skills of their most experienced craftsmen. As a result, a patchwork of regulations emerged across Europe. In one town, the use of curved awls might be celebrated as a mark of progress, while in another, it could lead to a craftsman's tools being confiscated and their reputation tarnished. This inconsistency created a thriving black market for forbidden tools, with enterprising artisans smuggling contraband implements across borders under cover of night. The concept of forbidden stitches added another layer of complexity to the shoemaker's world. These intricate patterns, often incorporating symbols of significance to the guild, were more than mere decoration. They were a visual language, instantly recognizable to those in the know, speaking volumes about the skill and status of the craftsmen who created them. For an ambitious journeyman, the temptation to incorporate these forbidden designs into their work could be overwhelming. The allure of recognition and advancement within the guild hierarchy sometimes proved too strong to resist. Yet the consequences of such transgressions could be severe, ranging from public humiliation to permanent expulsion from the trade. In response to these challenges, some guilds developed elaborate systems of apprenticeship and advancement. Aspiring shoemakers would progress through clearly defined stages, each marked by the mastery of specific tools and techniques. Only upon reaching the highest levels would they be entrusted with the most closely guarded secrets of the craft. This system of gradual revelation served multiple purposes. It ensured that the most valuable knowledge remained protected, passed down only to those who had proven their dedication and skill. It also provided a clear path for advancement, giving apprentices a tangible goal to work towards in maintaining the guild's hierarchical structure. As the centuries passed, the strict regulations governing shoemaking began to evolve. The rise of new manufacturing techniques and changing economic conditions forced even the most conservative guilds to adapt. Slowly but surely, many of the once forbidden tools found their way into common use, transforming the craft in ways that would have been unimaginable to earlier generations. Yet even as the practical restrictions loosened, the mystique surrounding certain aspects of shoemaking remained. The memory of forbidden tools and secret stitches lingered, woven into the very fabric of the craft's history. Master shoemakers continued to guard their most prized techniques, passing them down to select apprentices in hushed tones and behind closed doors. In the end, the story of guild regulations in shoemaking is one of constant negotiation between tradition and progress. It speaks to the deep human desire to protect and preserve knowledge, even in the face of inevitable change. The echoes of these ancient practices can still be heard today in the workshops of artisanal shoemakers who continue to honor the craft's rich heritage while embracing the innovations of the modern world. As we reflect on this chapter of shoemaking history, we are reminded of the power of tradition and the allure of forbidden knowledge. The tools and stitches that once caused such controversy now stand as testament to the enduring spirit of craftsmanship, spirit that continues to shape the art of shoemaking to this day. In the quiet corners of medieval workshops, the art of shoemaking thrived, its secrets passed down through generations. As the sun rose each morning, journeymen would set forth on their travels, not in search of grand adventures, but to seek knowledge and offer their skilled hands wherever they might be needed. These wandering craftsmen carried with them more than just tools and leather. Each journeyman bore a travel book, its pages a testament to their journey. In every city, a stamp would be added, a humble mark of their presence and dedication to the craft. From the cobbled streets of Florence to the bustling markets of Antwerp, these artisans would find their way, each step bringing them closer to mastery. In the workshops of Nuremberg, a journeyman might spend a season learning the intricacies of German craftsmanship. The local guild would welcome him, sharing techniques passed down through centuries. Here, he would observe how the leather was cut with precision, how the saws were shaped to withstand the harsh northern winters. Each stitch and hammer blow would be a lesson, absorbed and treasured. As autumn leaves began to fall, our journeyman might find himself in the heart of Paris. The French approach to shoemaking was different, more ornate, with a flair for the dramatic. He would watch in awe as master craftsmen created shoes fit for royalty, adorned with intricate embroidery and delicate buckles. The Parisian Guild's regulations on such ornamentation were strict, ensuring that even the most elaborate designs never compromised the shoe's integrity. Winter would see him in Venice, where the unique challenges of the watery city influenced every aspect of shoemaking. The Venetian Guild had developed special techniques for waterproofing leather, their regulations demanding shoes that could withstand the constant moisture. Our journeymen would learn to select the finest hides, to treat them with oils and waxes that repelled water while maintaining suppleness. With each city, each workshop, the journeyman's understanding of his craft would deepen. He would see how the basic principles of shoemaking taught to him as an apprentice could be interpreted in countless ways. In Milan, he might learn of regulations that dictated the exact height of a heel for different social classes. In London, he would encounter rules about the types of leather permitted for various styles of shoes. These variations in guild regulations were not seen as contradictions, but as a rich tapestry of tradition. The core values remained constant: quality, patience, and form. Whether crafting a sturdy work boot in the north or a delicate slipper in the south, these principles guided every journeyman's hand. As spring blossomed, our traveler might find himself in the workshops of Prague. Here, the guild's regulations emphasized the importance of sustainability, long before it became a modern concern. Journeymen learned to use every scrap of leather, to repair rather than replace, to create shoes that would last for years. The Prague Guild stamp in a travel book was highly prized, a symbol of resourcefulness and respect for materials. Summer would bring new horizons, perhaps a journey to the Iberian Peninsula. In the sun-drenched workshops of Cordoba, the journeyman would encounter the art of cordwaining, the crafting of fine leather goods. The local guild's regulations were steeped in Moorish influence, with intricate patterns and vibrant colors that challenged Northern European sensibilities. Yet even here, the fundamental principles of quality shoemaking remained, a common language spoken by craftsmen across continents. Throughout his travels, the journeyman would not only learn, but also teach. In each workshop, he would share techniques from his homeland, demonstrating methods that might be unknown in his temporary home. This exchange of knowledge was the lifeblood of the craft, ensuring that innovation and tradition flowed freely across borders. The guild system, with its complex web of regulations, might seem restrictive to modern eyes. Yet for the medieval shoemaker, it provided a framework for excellence. Each guild's rules were a distillation of centuries of experience, designed to uphold standards and protect both craftsman and consumer. As our journeyman moved from city to city, He would see how these regulations adapted to local needs and materials while maintaining their core purpose. In the workshops of Ghent, for instance, the guild's regulations might focus on the treatment of leather, specifying exact mixtures of tannins and oils to create supple yet durable shoes. The journeyman would spend weeks mastering these formulas, understanding how slight variations could affect the final product. The Ghent Guild's stamp in his book would be a proud testament to this specialized knowledge. Moving eastward, perhaps to the ancient city of Crackle, our traveler would encounter regulations that emphasized the spiritual aspects of craftsmanship. Here, the guild might require its members to observe certain rituals before beginning work, seeing the creation of shoes as a sacred act. The journeyman would learn to approach his craft with reverence, understanding that each pair of shoes carried with it the hopes and prayers of its maker. As the seasons turned and years passed, the journeyman's travel book would become a treasured record of his growth. Each stamp, each notation, told a story of skills acquired and friendships forged. The variations in guild regulations he encountered were not barriers but bridges, connecting him to a vast network of fellow craftsmen across Europe. In time, many journeymen would settle, choosing a city to call home and joining its local guild as full members. They would bring with them the wealth of knowledge gathered on their travels, enriching their new communities with diverse techniques and perspectives. Others would continue to wander, becoming living repositories of shoemaking lore, respected and welcomed wherever their paths led them. The legacy of these traveling craftsmen lives on in the shoes we wear today. Though the guild system has long since faded, its spirit of quality and craftsmanship endures. In workshops and factories around the world, the echoes of ancient regulations can still be heard in the careful selection of materials, in the precision of each stitch, in the pride taken in a well-made shoe. And so, like mist drifting between valleys, the art of shoemaking continues to evolve. What was once standard in Florence might now be a rarity in New York, yet the fundamental principles remain: quality, patience, and form. These are the lasting gifts of the medieval guilds, passed down through generations of journeymen. Their travel books long since turned to dust, but their wisdom eternally imprinted on the craft they loved. In the bustling towns of medieval Europe, guild regulations on shoemaking stood as pillars of order and quality, shaping not only the craft, but the very fabric of society. These rules, meticulously crafted and zealously enforced, were more than mere guidelines. They were the lifeblood of a trade that straddled the line between artistry and necessity. Shoemakers, neither nobles nor peasants, occupied a unique position in the social hierarchy. Their craft demanded skill, precision, and an intimate knowledge of materials that set them apart from the common laborer. Yet, they were not of the aristocracy, their hands calloused from the daily toil of their trade. This middling status afforded them a peculiar vantage point, one that allowed them to interact with all strata of society, from the lowliest beggar to the wealthiest merchant. The guilds, recognizing the power and responsibility inherent in this position, established regulations that were as intricate as the stitches in a fine pair of boots. These rules governed every aspect of the shoemaker's craft, from the sourcing of leather to the final polish of a completed shoe. Quality was paramount, for a poorly made shoe could lead to discomfort, injury, or even death on long journeys. In many towns, the process of becoming a master shoemaker was akin to a sacred rite. Apprentices would spend years learning the trade, their fingers growing nimble as they mastered the art of cutting leather and shaping saws. The journey from apprentice to journeyman was marked by trials and tests, each designed to prove the aspiring shoemaker's worth. Only those who demonstrated exceptional skill and unwavering dedication were granted the title of master. The guild's influence extended far beyond the workshop. They set prices, ensuring fair competition and preventing the exploitation of customers. They regulated working hours, striving to balance the demands of the craft with the need for rest and spiritual observance. In some regions, shoemakers were forbidden from working on Sundays and holy days, a nod to the sacred nature of their calling. For indeed, shoemaking was often viewed as more than mere labor. It was a vocation blessed by the divine. Saint Crispin and Saint Crispinian, the patron saints of shoemakers, were said to have practiced the craft by night while preaching the gospel by day. Their story inspired generations of shoemakers to view their work as a form of devotion, each stitch a prayer, each completed pair an offering to the Almighty. This spiritual dimension of the craft was reflected in the guild regulations. Many required shoemakers to swear oaths of honesty and fair dealing, invoking the names of saints and promising to uphold the honor of their profession. Some guilds even mandated regular attendance at Mass or participation in religious processions, further cementing the link between craft and faith. The materials used in shoemaking were subject to strict oversight. Leather, the lifeblood of the trade, was carefully inspected for quality and provenance. The use of inferior hides or the practice of adulterating leather with cheaper materials was met with severe penalties. Some guilds went so far as to specify the types of animals from which leather could be sourced, with preferences varying by region and tradition. Tools, too, were regulated. A master shoemaker's workshop was a carefully curated collection of specialized implements, each with its own purpose and pedigree. The awl, the knife, the last these were not mere instruments, but extensions of the craftsman's will, and their quality was a reflection of his skill and standing. Guild regulations often specified the types of tools that could be used, ensuring consistency and maintaining standards across the trade. The finished product, a pair of shoes, was subject to rigorous inspection. Guild officials would examine completed work, looking for flaws in stitching, imperfections in the leather, or signs of hasty workmanship. A shoe that failed to meet the guild's exacting standards could be confiscated or destroyed, and the maker faced fines or even expulsion from the guild. Yet for all their strictness, the guild regulations were not immutable. They evolved with time, adapting to changes in fashion, technology, and social mores. The introduction of new materials or techniques often led to heated debates within guild halls, as masters grappled with the tension between tradition and innovation. In some towns, the Shoemakers Guild wielded considerable political influence. Their representatives sat on town councils, their voices respected in matters of commerce and civic planning. this power was not without its responsibilities. Shoemakers were often called upon to contribute to the defense of the town, either through the provision of goods or in times of dire need, through military service. The relationship between shoemakers and their customers was carefully regulated to ensure fairness and prevent exploitation. Prices were set by the guild, taking into account the cost of materials, the complexity of the work, and the need for a living wage. Bargaining was often discouraged or outright forbidden, a practice that protected both the craftsman and the customer from the vagaries of the marketplace. Custom orders, a staple of the shoemaker's trade, were subject to their own set of rules. Contracts between shoemaker and client were often drawn up with exacting detail, specifying materials, design, and delivery dates. These agreements were binding, and breaches could result in legal action or damage to one's reputation within the community. Apprenticeship, the foundation of the guild system, was perhaps the most heavily regulated aspect of the shoemaker's world. The number of apprentices a master could take on was strictly limited, ensuring that each received proper instruction and preventing the flooding of the market with unskilled labor. The terms of apprenticeship were carefully spelled out, with provisions for food, lodging, and education balanced against the labor provided by the apprentice. As twilight fell on the medieval world and the dawn of industrialization approached, the guild regulations that had governed shoemaking for centuries began to show signs of straying. New methods of production challenged the traditional ways, and the rise of merchant capitalism threatened the guild's monopoly on the trade. Yet even as the old order faded, the legacy of the guild regulations lived on. The emphasis on quality, the pride in craftsmanship, and the sense of community fostered by the guilds continued to influence shoemakers long after the last guild hall had closed its doors. In workshops and factories, in bustling cities and quiet villages, the echoes of those ancient rules could still be heard in the tap of the hammer and the whisper of leather. In the twilight of their reign, the shoemaking guilds began to fade like shadows at dusk. The once mighty regulations that governed every stitch and sole slowly unraveled, thread by thread. As the world around them changed, these ancient institutions found themselves struggling to keep pace with the relentless march of progress. The guilds had long been the guardians of craft, their rules etched into the very fabric of society. But as cities grew and trade expanded, their influence waned like a candle burning low. The strict regulations that once ensured quality now seemed like shackles, holding back innovation and growth. In the bustling marketplaces of Europe, a new era was dawning. Merchants and craftsmen alike began to chafe against the constraints of guild regulations. The carefully guarded secrets of shoemaking, passed down through generations, were now whispered in alleyways and shared in hushed tones. The monopoly on knowledge was crumbling, like old leather left too long in the sun. Yet even as their power diminished, the guilds clung to their traditions with the tenacity of a cobbler's wax. In small towns and villages, the rhythmic tap of hammers on leather could still be heard, a faint echo of a once mighty chorus. Here, the old ways persisted, not out of necessity, but out of reverence for the craft that had shaped their lives for centuries. The decline was not sudden, but a gradual erosion, like water wearing away stone. New technologies emerged, promising faster production and lower costs. The guilds, set in their ways, struggled to adapt. Their rigid structures, once a source of strength, now became their greatest weakness. In the halls of power, winds of change were blowing. Monarchs and city councils, eager to boost trade and fill their coffers, began to chip away at guild privileges. Royal charters were granted to enterprising individuals, bypassing the traditional system of apprenticeship and mastery. The carefully constructed edifice of guild control began to crumble brick by brick. Yet, even as their influence waned, the legacy of the guilds lived on. The standards they had set, the pride and craftsmanship they had instilled, these remained like footprints in the sands of time. In workshops across the land, master shoemakers still passed on their knowledge to eager apprentices, not because they were bound by guild law, but because it was in their blood. The old ceremonies, once grand affairs that brought entire communities together, became quieter, more intimate gatherings. In candlelit rooms, aging craftsmen would raise a toast to the memory of the guilds, their eyes misting with nostalgia for a world that was slipping away. As mass production took hold, the individual touch that had been the hallmark of guild-made shoes became a luxury, sought after by those who could afford to indulge in such craftsmanship. The skills honed over centuries found new expression in bespoke creations, each pair a testament to the enduring spirit of the craft. In some corners of the world, the old regulations lingered like stubborn ghosts, refusing to be exorcised completely. Small towns, proud of their heritage, clung to the traditions of the guilds, even as the world around them changed. Here, the annual festivals of St. Crispin, patron saint of shoemakers, were still celebrated with fervor, a colorful defiance against the tide of progress. The guild halls, once centers of power and influence, found new purpose. Some became museums, showcasing the tools and techniques of a bygone era. Others were transformed into schools, where the art of shoemaking was taught not as a closely guarded secret, but as a living tradition to be shared and celebrated. As the Industrial Revolution gathered steam, the last vestiges of guild control were swept away like leaves in an autumn wind. Factories sprang up, churning out shoes by the thousands, each identical to the last. The personal touch, the subtle variations that had been the hallmark of guild-made shoes, became a rarity. Yet even in this new world of mass production, the spirit of the guilds lived on. In small workshops, tucked away in side streets and quiet corners, master craftsmen still plied their trade. Here, the old skills were preserved, passed down from master to apprentice in an unbroken chain that stretched back centuries. The regulations that had once governed every aspect of shoemaking became a curiosity, studied by historians and enthusiasts. The intricate rules that dictated the quality of leather, the number of stitches per inch, the proper shape of a heel, these were now relics of a vanished world. Yet, in their complexity and attention to detail, they spoke of a time when craftsmanship was not just a job, but a calling. As the years passed, a new appreciation for handcrafted goods began to emerge. In a world of mass-produced uniformity, the unique character of guild-inspired shoes found a new audience. Artisans, drawing on the traditions of the old guilds, began to create bespoke footwear that rivaled the finest creations of their ancestors. The old guild marks, once symbols of quality and craftsmanship, became sought-after brands. Shoes bearing these marks commanded premium prices, not because of any legal requirement, but because they represented a connection to a rich heritage of skill and artistry. In time, the strict regulations of the guilds faded from memory, like footprints washed away by the tides of time. But the essence of what they stood for, quality, skill, and pride in one's craft, endured. It lived on in the hands of every shoemaker who took pride in their work, in every apprentice who strove to master the intricacies of their trade. The shoemaking guilds did not rage against their end. They did not go out in a blaze of glory or defiant last stand. Instead, they faded gently, like the soft leather of a well-loved shoe, their legacy absorbed into the very fabric of the craft they had nurtured for so long. In quiet workshops, in the careful stitching of a sole, in the polishing of a fine leather upper, the spirit of the guilds lived on. Not as rigid rules or strict regulations, but as a whispered reminder of the value of skill, the importance of quality, and the enduring beauty of a well-made shoe. And so, as the world moved on, the legacy of the shoemaking guilds remained, not as a relic of the past, but as a living tradition. In every pair of handcrafted shoes, in every carefully placed stitch, the echoes of centuries of craftsmanship could still be heard. The guilds had not vanished. They had simply transformed, their essence woven into the very soul of shoemaking itself. In time, the guilds began to wane. The rise of city-states, royal privileges, and mass production slowly eroded their power, but they did not vanish entirely. In some places, rules lingered like ink faded on old parchment. A few towns still held quiet ceremonies in honor of the old guilds, not out of necessity, but remembrance. The shoemaking guild did not fight its end. It passed into memory like a well-worn shoe, placed gently on a shelf. As we draw our journey through the annals of shoemaking to a close, let us pause for a moment of reflection. The echoes of hammers and the whisper of leather have faded, but the spirit of the guilds lingers still, like the scent of tanned hide in an old workshop. In the quiet corners of history, we have walked alongside the master craftsmen, their hands calloused and sure, guided by rules as old as the stones beneath their feet. These regulations, once etched in parchment and memory, were more than mere words. They were the very foundation upon which an entire craft was built. Picture, if you will, the dim light of a medieval workshop. The air is thick with the mingled scents of leather and wood smoke. A lone figure hunches over a workbench, his fingers moving with a grace born of years of practice. Each stitch he places, each sole he shapes, is a testament to the guild's teachings. The regulations that govern his work are not chains, but rather a framework within which his creativity can flourish. These rules, passed down through generations, were not created to stifle, but to nurture. They ensured that every pair of shoes that left the workshop was a masterpiece in its own right. From the selection of the hide to the final polish, Every step was guided by the collective wisdom of those who had come before. In the bustling markets of medieval towns, a pair of shoes was more than mere footwear. It was a symbol of the guild's pride, a tangible representation of the standards they upheld. The regulations dictated not just the quality of the product, but the very essence of what it meant to be a shoemaker. Consider the apprentice, wide-eyed and eager, absorbing every word of his master's instruction. The guild's rules were his roadmap, guiding him from novice to journeyman, and perhaps one day to master. Each lesson learned was a step closer to perfection. Each skill mastered a tribute to the craft he had chosen. As we've explored, these regulations touched every aspect of the shoemaker's life. They dictated the hours of work, the tools to be used, even the relationships between master and apprentice. But far from being restrictive, they created a sense of belonging, a community bound together by shared purpose and pride in their work. In the quiet of the night, when the last customer had gone and the day's work was done, the shoemaker could rest easy. The guild's rules were his compass, ensuring that tomorrow's labor would be as meaningful and purposeful as today's had been. And what of the shoes themselves? Each pair was a silent testament to the regulations that had shaped them. The careful selection of materials, the precise cutting of the leather, the meticulous stitching, all were governed by rules honed over centuries. Yet within these constraints, true artistry flourished. Imagine a pair of shoes from that era, lovingly preserved in some forgotten corner of a museum. They speak not just of fashion or function, but of a way of life. In every stitch and seam, we can read the story of the guild that created them, the regulations that guided their making, and the hands that brought them into being. As we stand at the threshold of our own time, looking back at these ancient practices, what can we learn? Perhaps it is that true craftsmanship requires not just skill, but discipline. That rules, far from limiting us, can provide the structure within which our creativity can soar. In our modern world of mass production and instant gratification, there is something profoundly comforting about the idea of a craft governed by timeless rules. It speaks to a part of us that yearns for quality, for things made with care and attention to detail. The guild regulations on shoemaking were more than just a set of instructions. They were a philosophy, a way of approaching work and life that valued patience, precision, and pride in one's craft. In a world that often seems to prioritize speed over quality, perhaps we could all benefit from embracing a little of that medieval mindset. As we close this chapter on the guild regulations of shoemaking, let us carry with us the lessons they offer. Let us remember that true mastery comes not from breaking rules, but from understanding them so deeply that they become a part of us. In the end, these ancient regulations remind us of a simple truth, that anything worth doing is worth doing well. That in the careful application of skill and knowledge, we can create things of lasting beauty and value. And so, dear listener, we come to the end of our exploration. The guilds may be gone, their regulations no longer binding, but their spirit lives on in every craftsperson who takes pride in their work. In every pair of handmade shoes, in every carefully stitched seam, we can still hear the whisper of those ancient rules. As you drift towards sleep, perhaps you'll dream of those medieval workshops, of hands moving with quiet purpose, of shoes taking shape under the watchful eye of the guild. And in that dream, you might find a kind of peace, a reminder that even in our fast-paced world, there is still value in slowness, in care, in doing things the right way. The guild's rules may no longer govern our daily lives, but they remain a gentle reminder of what we can achieve when we dedicate ourselves to excellence. They are a legacy as enduring as the leather they once shaped, as comforting as a well-worn pair of shoes. Rest now, if you will. The story of the Shoemakers Guild and their regulations will be here when you wake, waiting to inspire and guide. As timeless as the craft itself, and just as rich with meaning. Thank you for joining me on this quiet journey through the intricate world of medieval shoemaking guilds. As we conclude our exploration of these fascinating regulations, I invite you to stay with me a little longer. Let this playlist continue, like the rhythmic tapping of a cobbler's hammer, guiding you through more gentle histories of forgotten crafts and ancient trades. In the dimly lit workshops of medieval Europe, the art of shoemaking was more than just a trade. It was a carefully regulated profession, bound by the strict rules of powerful guilds. These organizations, formed to protect the interests of their members and maintain the quality of their craft, wielded significant influence over the lives and livelihoods of shoemakers. The guild regulations on shoemaking were as diverse as the shoes they produced, varying from city to city and evolving over time. Yet, certain common threads wove through these rules, creating a tapestry of tradition and innovation that shaped the craft for centuries. At the heart of these regulations was the apprenticeship system. Young, aspiring shoemakers would be taken under the wing of a master craftsman, often for a period of 7 years or more. During this time, they would learn not just the technical skills of cutting leather and stitching saws, but also the unwritten codes of conduct and the secrets of the trade passed down through generations. The journey from apprentice to master was a long and arduous one. After completing their apprenticeship, craftsmen would become journeymen, traveling from town to hone their skills under different masters. Only after producing a masterpiece, a pair of shoes of exceptional quality, could they hope to be admitted to the ranks of master shoemakers. Quality control was paramount in guild regulations. Masters were required to use only the finest materials, with strict rules governing the types of leather and thread that could be used. The use of inferior materials or shoddy workmanship could result in hefty fines or even expulsion from the guild. Interestingly, many guild regulations also dictated the styles and designs of shoes that could be produced. In some cities, shoemakers were forbidden from creating shoes with excessively long, pointed toes, a fashion that had become popular among the nobility, but was seen as impractical and even morally dubious by some guild masters. The guilds also played a role in regulating competition within the trade. Many cities had strict limits on the number of master shoemakers who could operate within their walls, and regulations often prohibited masters from poaching apprentices or journeymen from their fellow guild members. But the reach of guild regulations extended far beyond the workshop. They often dictated the personal lives of their members, requiring shoemakers to be of good moral character and to attend church regularly. Some guilds even had rules about the clothing their members could wear, ensuring that shoemakers presented a respectable appearance to their customers and the wider community. Perhaps most importantly, the guilds provided a safety net for their members. In times of illness or hardship, guild funds could be used to support shoemakers and their families. When a master shoemaker passed away, the guild would often step in to ensure that his widow and children were cared for, sometimes even arranging for apprentices to continue the deceased master's work. The enforcement of these regulations was taken very seriously. Guild officials would conduct regular inspections of workshops, examining both the quality of the shoes being produced and the working conditions of the apprentices and journeymen. Violations could result in fines, public shaming, or in extreme cases, expulsion from the guild, a punishment that could effectively end a shoemaker's career. Yet, for all their strictness, these regulations were not immutable. As fashions changed and new techniques were developed, guilds had to adapt. The introduction of new tools or materials often led to heated debates within guild meetings, as masters weighed the benefits of innovation against the risks of departing from tradition. One particularly contentious issue that arose in many shoemaking guilds was the question of specialization. As the demand for shoes grew and styles became more diverse, some shoemakers began to focus on particular types of footwear. This led to debates within guilds about whether to allow members to specialize or to insist that all masters be capable of producing a full range of shoes. The regulations also had to contend with external pressures. As trade between cities increased, guilds had to find ways to protect their members from competition from foreign shoemakers, while still allowing for the exchange of ideas and techniques that could improve their craft. The rise of mercantilism and early capitalism in the late medieval and early modern periods posed new challenges to the guild system. As monarchs and city governments sought to encourage industry and trade, they sometimes came into conflict with guild regulations that were seen as overly restrictive. Despite these challenges, the guild system and its regulations remained a cornerstone of the shoemaking trade well into the early modern period. Even as industrialization began to transform the production of shoes, many of the values and practices instilled by centuries of guild regulations continued to influence the craft. Today, as we look back on these ancient regulations, we can see them not just as rules that govern a trade, but as a reflection of a society's values and aspirations. They speak to a time when craftsmanship was revered, when the relationship between master and apprentice was sacred, and when the quality of one's work was seen as a reflection of one's character. As our journey through the world of medieval shoemaking guilds comes to an end, I hope you've gained a new appreciation for the complex web of traditions and regulations that shape this ancient craft. Perhaps the next time you slip on a pair of shoes, you'll pause for a moment to consider the long history of skill, dedication, and regulation that made them possible. Thank you for joining me on this quiet journey. If you'd like more gentle histories, you may simply let this playlist continue, like the soft creaking of leather as it molds to fit a foot, telling tales of crafts long past but not forgotten.